Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit. After meeting the disciple Philip on the road, after hearing about Jesus as the one who bears all our hopes and who loves us unconditionally, the Ethiopian man, a high ranking official in the queen's court, asked on the spot to be baptized. He said, "What is to prevent me from being baptized right here and right now?" He was asking, do I need to take classes? Do I need to become a member of something? Do I need to be at some special font for this to happen? In a moment of creative response, Philip points to what we assume was just a pond or a creek by the side of the road, and there they went. Transformation and grace happened in a way that immediately expanded what it meant to follow Jesus. The conversion of our hearts often happens where we least expect it, and so often it happens out there, not beside our glorious fonts, but instead in the humblest of places. More than a year ago, I stood next to the cathedral font and I spoke to you in my first weekly video. We were just beginning this season of distance. I spoke about the font as one of the treasures of the cathedral, like the altar, like the reredos and the stained glass, like the organ or the choir or the bread and the wine and water of the universe, the Eucharist. These holy things bear God's story. They are outward and visible signs of our faith. They are artifacts and amplifiers of God's life-giving love for the world. We knew in that moment 14 months ago that we would be away from these treasures for a time, something without precedent in our lifetime. Away from the cathedral space, we would have to become the treasures. We would have to become not just the people of the cathedral, but the cathedral itself. Witnesses in prayer and word and action to God's presence in the world. But now, 14 months later, not quite done with this pandemic, but beginning to see its end, I want to revise my metaphor. A year ago, I talked about treasure, and that's a fine symbol. But this morning's readings, falling as they do on our annual meeting, say something to me that is a bit more living, a bit more interconnected, and a whole lot more embodied. We are branches in a vineyard connected to the vine, abiding in Jesus. And the fruit we bear is the love that transforms the world. That is who we were before the pandemic, and it's who we've continued to be even in a season apart. Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me and you will bear fruit. And then 1 John says a little more. If we love one another, God lives in us. Following Jesus, whether we're social distanced or live and in person, whether we're high church or low church, whether we're Baptist or Orthodox or anywhere between and beyond, following Jesus means perfecting the love that is in us and showing the world what it means to be loved. That may look a little different in a time of pandemic. And that certainly calls us to greater witness and action when faced with systemic injustice. And I'd even go a step further and say that we may find our unique cathedral vocation in that same call. Following Jesus means reaching towards perfection in love and showing the world what it means to be loved. Jesus is the vine, and we are the branches. And the vine is known not by anything but its fruit. If it bear grapes, if it draws life from the source, then it's a keeper. The parable of the vine and the branches is all about connection, something we so desperately need. We need to be connected to Jesus. We need to be connected to our church. We need to be connected to our grandchildren and our friends. As a cathedral, we need to be connected to the church, to our city, to the churches of the diocese, and even to our companions in ministry whose faith may be different from ours. Stephen Cooper writes that the parable of the vine challenges all of us whose lives have been constructed largely on the modern idea of the sovereign individual, where acts in a community tend to be seen as outside the central spaces of our lives. Well, on the vine, there is no such compartmentalization. Imagine the absurdity of a branch saying the things that we as individuals say all the time. No branch in the history of winemaking has ever borne fruit apart from the vine. A branch could never say, I did this entirely on my own. I live unto myself on my own horizon, and I brought forth grapes of my own strength and creativity. Have you tried my unique red blend made of grapes from my own making? A vine is not that at all. A vine is deeply interconnected and interwoven. It is about production and increase. It is made of branches that are interdependent and draw life from the true vine. And it is known by its fruit. My friends, that fruit is love. When I speak of love, I don't just mean a warm feeling or a Hallmark card. Rather, love is God's gift to us, and it's the animating spirit of all we do when we follow Jesus. What does fruitfulness look like? Is it charity and good works? Is it a growing church? Is it more followers of Jesus? Is it a beautiful space with music that touches our hearts? Is it sharing a meal with someone who slept outside the night before? Is it a community of disciples who care for each other through all of life's hardships and joys? It is all these things when what drives us is love. Following Jesus means reaching towards perfect love and showing the world what it means to be loved. Now, when this cathedral was built, 1907, but imagine a handful of decades leading up to that. When it was built, Bishop Leonard spoke of what that fruit might look like for Trinity. He envisioned a church for all people, wide enough, quoting him now, wide enough for the religious ingatherings of many who are even churchless or perhaps creedless. A common ground of Christian unity in the liturgy of the ancient church, teaching the faith while being a great civic and moral church for all people. He wrote, "It is a parable in stone, and every citizen, regardless of creed or church home, should say gladly, 'This is my church, and I have a right to it.'" Every person in our city, every person who walks by our door can look to us, can look to this space and say, "This is my church, and I have a right to it." That is a vision of perfecting love within us while showing the world what it means to be loved. Can the cathedral be a place, be both a place where we deepen our Christian faith and engage with humility and hospitality, a world where we meet God in so many ways? I think we honor our unique vocation when we do both to the fullest. We perfect the love that was in it, that is with, we perfect the love within us through our relationship with Jesus. And we meet God in surprising ways when we go out to serve and to welcome and to be changed by the world. We've been apart, but we are still branches of the same vine. We know this because of the fruit of the past year. A place at the table served more lunch to more people this year than we have in years. And because of your generosity and the support of local grants, we always had all the money we needed to do this. We continued to worship every Sunday because Sam Hubish and Scott Blanchard had essentially set up a production studio to make church happen. I won't tell you how early they've been getting here every Sunday. It'll make you blush. Every week, Fran Choma has restocked the Wall of Love with toiletries and cold weather necessities. Dozens of folks from Trinity and from the Diocese of Ohio have come together this year for racial equity training. and sacred ground classes where we've learned how racism has distorted the image of God in one another. All this planting and cultivating and pruning so that we can bear fruit. Following Jesus means perfecting love within us, and that's hard work. That's why racial reconciliation is not easy. That's why the inner work of healing and transformation is not easy. That's why the great spiritual teachers will remind us every time that prayer is actually one of the hardest things we do. That's why we remind each other time and time again that we are not alone. We are deeply connected to each other, and we bear fruit not by force of will, but through abiding in the vine itself. We remind each other that perfect love is what casts out fear. Fear is what turns our neighbors into adversaries and then into enemies. Fear distorts our relationships and our memories and cuts us off from the vine. Fear is what leads us to isolate ourselves from one another. Fear is what leads us to trust in wealth and power, and fear is what convinces us that we bear fruit on our own. But what casts out fear? What is the answer and the antidote? Perfect love. Love made perfect by a lifetime of abiding in Jesus, a lifetime of humility and forgiveness and self giving and gratitude and praise and prayer. Love made perfect in a community of saints and sinners. Love made perfect one day at a time, one live stream at a time, one Eucharist at a time, one meal served at a time, one phone call at a time, one prayer at a time. Following Jesus means perfecting the love that is in us and then showing the world what it means to be loved. My friends, remember that even though we are apart for just a little longer, we remain connected as we abide in the true and living vine. Our connection to each other and to God cannot be severed. It cannot be severed by pandemic or injustice or hate or even fear itself. For the love that binds us together is the same love that transfigures the brokenness of this world. Amen.